Hello, my wonderful little collections of bones. It's me, Glass Lotuses, your friendly and mildly eerie digital artist, writer, and cat lover. How are you doing this evening? I hope you've had a pleasant day. I made some yummy barbecue chicken pizza the other day, and it turned out great, and now I can't stop thinking about it, and I want to make it again. In past videos, we've gone over the 6 primordial gods: order, chaos, earth, water, air, and fire. In this pantheon, the gods are broken up into 2 courts: order's court and chaos's court. Earth and water are in order's court, and air and fire are in chaos's court. Below each of those 4 are an additional 3 deities. In this video, we'll cover the god of life and death from Earth's group of gods. This video is a bit longer and will be more of a story format. I hope you enjoy this format, and if all goes well, I might make more like this in the future. Let me know what you think. Elys is the god of life and death, and he's the oldest of the gods in terms of how long I've had him in my head. I think I started designing him around the same time I designed Saynna and Calica, so he's around 10 years old conceptually. Originally, he had his own fantasy romance story planned, which got mashed together to form the story I have now. Functionally, he's the escort of souls to and from the mortal plane, overseeing the number and timing of births and deaths. In terms of divine energy, he draws his power from the transfer of life, its beginnings and its endings. He is a very empathetic god and finds satisfaction in providing comfort to the dying, guidance to those who are departing, and blessings to those hoping to expect a new arrival. He works very closely with Amanita in terms of the flow of nutrients and biological matter through the cycles of life, death, and decay, and balancing that, as well as closely with Anaya, the god of souls and the afterlife. In his mortal life, Elys grew up working in a potions shop with his family. His elder sibling was far more skilled at potion making than he was, though, but he did still like helping people and learning about various physical and magical ailments. He eventually decided to attend school to become a doctor instead. Through a combination of natural talent, early teachings, and dedicated work, he earned a position as a doctor for the ruling family of the country he lived in. He was very well known for solving and documenting many strange new illnesses, primarily of a magical variety. This meant that he was well positioned to take up a new challenge when some strange reports came through of illness in both people and animals in a small village on the edge of the empire. Elys traveled to the village and was greeted warmly by the people. The animals and humans had varying symptoms, typically starting with an abnormal increase in energy. They would often want to run or play more. At first it would seem like just a good day. They'd get more work done than usual, and their aches and pains would seem lighter. But that night they would find they were not tired. They were restless and unable to sleep no matter how much they tried. Animals would try to escape their pens and run around, disturbing the others. Their appetites would sharply increase, and they would begin to consume food far more than their families could sustain. This would, in many cases, cause considerable fighting within the families. The heightened energy would crumble as exhaustion and hunger set in, and over the course of a few days, dark spots would begin to appear on the bodies of the people and animals. It was not as readily apparent on the animals with long fur, but often the animals would begin to gnaw or scratch the spots and reveal them. While the spots did not appear swollen, if pressure was applied, the skin would tear, and a dark substance with small white flecks would leak out and stain anything it touched. If not washed off quickly enough, the stains would set, and the person or creature stained would suffer the same fate eventually. Once the wounds were open, they would grow and fail to seal up. The sufferers would stop eating entirely at this stage and become extremely lethargic. The bodies of the sufferers would become encompassed by the darkness, and they would lose all definition to their features over the course of several days. They would fall asleep and never wake up again. The bodies were often moved to one of several mass grave sites, as it was quickly realized that if they were not, they underwent a strange form of decomposition which tainted everything in the surrounding vicinity and could not be cleaned. The surrounding soil of the mass grave itself was permeated, and it looked like a giant pit of the night sky. Over the course of a couple weeks, Elys watched this process happen to many animals and people. He took heed of the warnings not to allow the dark liquid to touch him, and noted what remedies the people had already tried. He mixed up concoction after concoction, and cast many spells. He could not seem to stop or even delay the disease's progression. All he could do was treat the earlier symptoms. The illness was clearly magic in origin, based on the way the bodies would fall apart, but it had no clear hallmarks of any magic that he was familiar with, and he was unequipped to treat it. He had just sent a letter back to the palace and went out for an evening walk, when he noticed something dark in the forest a ways away from the path. Venturing out into the brush, he found a circle of plants all tainted by the same dark decay. Those in the center were already disintegrated, and a large hole was left where they had been, as it spread out equally in a ring. The center appeared to be almost a reflection of the night sky, a void into space, but it writhed and danced unlike any stars he knew. Perhaps a bird had been tainted and fallen here, or a rodent of some kind had run from the pit and made it this far. In any case, saying nothing further to investigate, he went back to his temporary lodgings. At first, as he lay awake, he found his mind racing. He was unable to stop thinking about the circle. He wondered if perhaps this same nocturnal restlessness was how his patients felt, and he worried that somehow being near the circle had infected him. He tossed and turned, paranoid, and when dawn came, he was out of bed and back into the woods. The circle had grown, and he now noticed a ways away from it was another dark mark on the foliage. Hastening over, rather than this one being a circle, it appeared to be a large smear on the earth, as though someone had dragged a huge boulder. Following the direction it led, he rounded a small mound, and behind it, he found a large beast. It was much larger than even the biggest imperial warhorse or field ox, and appeared to be covered in something resembling feathers. He could not discern a face, nor any particular body parts for that matter, but he could tell it was breathing. After observing it briefly, and seeing the same dark ooze pouring off its body as happened with the villagers, he tried to speak to it. A large wing lifted, and it almost appeared to blot out the sun as it stretched out over his head. The underside of the wing and the side of the body appeared just as the center of the decayed circle had, like a brilliant dancing night sky. A sinking feeling consumed Elys, and he felt as though he stood on a precipice no mortal should face. His heart seemed to seize, and his breath caught in his throat. From within the abyss of the darkness of this creature, hundreds if not thousands of eyes stared back. For a moment it just watched, and he dared not move. He broke, though, and swallowed out of nervousness. A disembodied voice seemed to speak from all around him. "You're a healer? Can you heal me?" Its body shifted around him. He still had room to escape if he wanted to, but he knew that this was the source. If he could heal whatever this entity was, perhaps the illness would stop spreading. The doctor steeled his resolve and agreed to try his best. Over the next several days, he would go back and forth from his temporary accommodations to the creature. He had no clue what it was or what was wrong with it, and it gave him almost no information beyond telling him that it was unwinding. He couldn't decipher what it meant by that. He had done his best not to touch the creature while trying to help it, and offer it medicine and magic. But over the course of his time aiding it, he found changes began to occur. These changes were not completely like his patient's. He lost his appetite and need for sleep, but did not become lethargic. His skin turned dark, but did not appear like the night sky in the same way his patients did. Instead, his bones slowly became visible. This primarily affected his hands at first, but spread over time. Afraid the villagers would believe him to be ill, he covered himself completely in clothing. He could not seem to help the creature, though, and the area around it in the forest was slowly being consumed. After a while, the creature told him that it appreciated his attempt, but that its time was short. It had given him a gift which he would see in time, and it explained that it was a being capable of weaving the fabric of reality, and it was particularly good at plucking at the strings of mortality. It could boost or diminish fertility, create plagues or inspire medical innovation, and bring to a close the spiral of one's mortal time. In its own undoing, this ability infected the world that it landed in, Elys's world, and for this it apologized. It had tried to contain it, tried to recover, but it was unable. It hoped the gift that it gave Elys would be some recompense for the harm that it had caused. The creature shifted, and all at once seemed to fall apart. Like a curtain allowed to drop, its parts disappeared, leaving just the scar of the night sky behind on the land. The illness, curse, or whatever it was, seemed to no longer spread after this. Those who had succumbed to it were not able to recover, but no more suffered the same fate. Over the next decade, the village was abandoned, and a wall constructed around it to shield it from prying eyes, and a plaque was put up to commemorate what happened there. Elys described the being to the imperial family as an ill spirit, but in truth he understood it to be more than that. From that time onwards, the doctor always wore gloves and long sleeves, and was never seen topless. He never married, but lived a long and productive life. He had a knack for saving those thought to be on the brink of death, and he aided the imperial family and others who came to him with fertility struggles. He wrote prolifically on his findings, defining many new medical and magical techniques for saving people. He still lacked the need for sleep, and while he no longer felt hungry, he often ate in a social capacity. He also found that he did not need to breathe. However, his heart beat inside his chest. Of that he was certain. For within his glowing blue rib cage, he could see the organ glow vibrantly scarlet and twitch with every beat. He did age, though, and when he himself died, the marks on his body vanished before anyone who might dress him in funerary attire saw what had become of him. When Elys awoke after death, he found himself to be as he was when he attempted to help the weaver, once more in his late 20s, strong and healthy. He initially found that his body was now entirely dark, with glowing bones within. His heart was as it had been in life as well, glowing but no longer beating unless he determined it to. If he chose, he could appear as he had in life before meeting the weaver, but he wore his glowing bones with pride, for they were a symbol and a gift representative of his medical skill and desire to help those who needed him. Elys went on to become a skilled god of life and death, and a perpetual voice of reason. While he was in Order's court, as life and death are cyclical things, he befriended the god of chaos, Contra, and also worked closely with the god of souls and the afterlife, Anaya, who operated within the Chaos Court. During the War of the Gods, Elys disagreed with what AS9, the god of order, was doing. He and Contra and Anaya formed a plan to stop the war, and shut down all the gods until a time could come where they could be reawakened. Of the gods, he was the last left conscious. Elys, as a god, was known for having a wife, who was a well-respected spirit who protected mothers and children. This partner followed Elys in his plan, and he made both himself and her corporeal in the mortal world. As the last god left, and with the divine realm broken, Elys's power waned after the war was over. To ensure his soul was captured, and to ensure the divine realm could be reopened, he and his wife produced one heir to whom his soul became bound. His soul, depleted of energy, passed down the generations of the Lysith family, until it finally passed to the main character in our primary storyline, Saynna. In this drawing specifically, I wasn't 100% sure how I wanted to capture him. I had no thoughts on how I wanted his clothes to be, but I knew I wanted to draw him, of course, dark, glowy, and skeletal. I went back and forth mentally on whether I wanted him to be completely skeletal, or to have a human face, and I originally started drawing him with more of a discernible face, and less of a skull. Then I ended up adding more of the skull look later, and to make it look fancier I drew inspiration from Dia de los Muertos skull designs, as well as henna designs, to just give it more character. I imagine a good part of Elys's duties is acting as the leader of the psychopomps in any of the realms he operates. So I take inspiration from things like the Greek myth of Charon, who is the ferryman of the dead across the rivers Acheron and Styx, and the Egyptian myth of Anubis, who of course weighed the hearts of mortals upon the scales to determine their fate in the afterlife. Most psychopomps that I'm aware of do not also double as the gods of the afterlife, which is another reason I chose to have Anaya act as the god of the afterlife instead of Elys. There's this divide between the physical, corporeal, mortal life, and the incorporeal states which exist beyond. Given this guiding behavior, though, I wanted him to have a kind of shepherd's crook with a lantern on it. I had originally planned for him to be holding a soul as well, although I know at the end it came out looking kind of like a fireball. I was originally supposed to have a little person's figure inside, but I lost my childhood cat around the time that I drew this, and I decided to change the figure inside into the soul of that of a cat. And then I got very self-conscious about it and made it a bit harder to see than I otherwise would have. He was a good cat, and we had him for 18 good years. In any case, I had little other plans in terms of the design here, and will likely revamp this a bit the next time I draw him. I hope you like how this all turned out, and I hope you enjoyed the story for his background. Let me know what you thought in the comments, whether you liked the story format more or more of the descriptive type of formats in the other ones. Thank you for listening to my ramblings today. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you're interested in learning more about this story, the world, and the characters within it, please like and subscribe. Good night.